Hey, Adam,
Geez,
one
why,
thing.
why do you think they called bumpers scary?
I don't know.
Because they come at the beginning, at the end, like bumpers.
Alex, you're a marketing guy. Do you like that design behind Paul? Does that sweet logo thing look pretty cool to you?
Hey, I forgot to hit the record button.
Yeah, that's really professional, isn't it?
Well, this is a professional podcast.
I met her in a parking lot and was handed 2 little Yorkies. And the only person I knew that knew Yorkies was Paul. So I called Paul and said, Paul.
Sweet Talk is a weekly 20-minute podcast brought to you by the Continuing Education and Workforce Training Division of Idaho State University's College of Technology. Find us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and SoundCloud and subscribe today. Now it's time to get started with Sweet Talk.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Sweet Talk, a weekly podcast here at Idaho State University's Continuing Education and Workforce Training. I am Paul Dickey. I am the apprenticeship coordinator here at Sweet. And today joining us is a co-host who's never been here before, Deb Wright, our EMT instructor, our lead EMT instructor. Deb, how are you doing today?
I am doing great. Thank you, Paul.
Well, thank you for joining us today. And there's a special reason why Deb's here, and we'll get into that. As always, Angie Wilhelm, our marketing director, is along with me again today. Angie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. For those of you listening, we are recording this just prior to a 3-day weekend, so we all get a little bit of extra time at home. For those of you who are familiar with us and familiar with what we do have an annual emergency medicine conference coming up that allows first responders to get a little bit of additional training or get any contact hours in. This year, our keynote speaker is Kevin Grange, who is here with us today. Kevin is the award-winning author of Wild Rescues, a paramedic's extreme adventure in Yosemite, Yellowstone, and Grand Teton, as well as Lights and Sirens, the education of a paramedic. He graduated from UCLA's paramedic program, and he currently works as a firefighter paramedic for the Jackson Hole Fire and EMS. Welcome, Kevin. Can you take a few minutes to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your background?
Sure. Well, thank you, Angie, Deb, and Paul for having me on the show. And I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm even more thrilled to be speaking at the conference in February. So just briefly, I grew up in New Hampshire, and I went to college in Seattle. And my first EMS job of sorts was working as a lifeguard at a water slide park. So I graduated from college, and then in my early 30s, I was working in real estate and my heart wasn't really into it. So I wanted to kind of help people in a more direct manner. So I signed up for a wilderness first aid class and loved that. And then I took my EMT class and just fell in love with the profession and kind of the team-based aspect. Then went to paramedic school. And then from there, I worked for the National Park Service for a number of summers before getting hired with Jackson Hole Fire EMS. So it's a great profession, and I'm excited to share my love of it with folks who attend the conference.
Excellent, excellent. So, Kevin, how long did you say you've been doing this?
I've been in EMS since around 2008, and then I've been a paramedic since 2011. So
Wow.
just about 13 years now.
And so you're doing wilderness EMT, correct?
Yes, I do a little bit of both. In Jackson, we kind of exist in what's known as like the wildland urban interface. So we have some city type of calls in the town of Jackson, but then we also respond to, snowmobile accidents up in like Togety Pass. So every day is very dynamic. And the differences between working in a city like Los Angeles and wilderness medicine are huge. And, I think that's what the conference is going to explore, because many folks in Idaho and Wyoming and Montana, they do work in like the rural and austere environment.
So working in Jackson Hole and doing those wilderness EMT rescues, do you have enough resources? I would imagine if from having some sort of emergency in the wilderness and then getting those resources to them, in a timely manner must be difficult.
It is. Everyone thinks a place like Los Angeles is crazy because there are some gunshots and some, knife attacks, but it's actually so much easier there because you're surrounded by hospitals, and hospitals are only like 5 or 10 minutes away, and you respond on scene with a lot of personnel. Whereas, as you were mentioning out here, our transport times to the hospital could be half an hour, could be 2 hours, could be 3 hours. And we also arrive on scene with less people, might just be your partner or maybe one or two others. So wilderness medicine and working in some of these rural places is a lot more challenging and dynamic, but also a lot more rewarding.
Okay, so because of that travel time increase, do you find that working for Jackson Hole, you now have to do more activities to keep a patient stable for that transport?
Yeah, definitely. And that's why I really love it, because you really get to practice medicine. Whereas in the city, you might have time just to start an IV, even if that, because the hospital's so close. Whereas out here, we're with the patient, for an extended period of time. So we can go down the whole treatment algorithm in caring for these patients and really practice medicine, for like an allergic reaction. We're not just giving that quick shot of epi. We're starting the IV, giving them Benadryl, giving them steroids, a breathing treatment. So again, it's really fun to practice medicine on that scale.
Okay, so also because I keep going to this transport time and the delay, I know that sometimes you run into patient panic, and that must be drawn out for a longer period of time. How do you handle that patient panic where they're in distress, and how do you what have you learned as skills to handle that?
Yeah, I like to say in some of my, presentations that talking is a treatment. And so by being able to talk with folks and calm them down, you can decrease that workload on the heart, help them oxygenate better. So you really learn to manage people and to kind of make that personal connection and show compassion, which improves their outcome. And then one thing I didn't mention is in these wilderness and rural rescues, the flying a patient to Idaho Falls or Portneuf is a huge part of, caring for them. So I know Portneuf Air is kind of co-chairing the conference or is one of the sponsors. So it takes a multi-agency approach to save lives, from the local EMS agency to these flight teams to the hospital. So it's really amazing. And when it works, it's super inspiring.
So I actually have a question for Kevin and Deb. So, and that's partially because I know, Kevin, you had some of your paramedic training in a much larger metropolitan, and Deb teaches that here, that our EMT here in a more rural area. And I know, Deb, that you do have a helicopter come in at some point. Can you talk a little bit about that, Deb, about that helicopter training? And then I want to hear from Kevin how that might differ from training he may have received in a larger metropolitan area.
When it comes to helicopters, like Kevin was saying, in a large metropolitan area, they are closer to hospitals. So I don't believe they use the helicopters quite so often. In the more rural community, we do use the helicopters when EMS can't get there as quickly. The helicopter will come in. It's all time relative. If that helicopter can get the person out and to the in facility quicker, we'll use a helicopter. So the training is the same. We all go through the same training, bring it in. Some places do what we call hot load, where they keep the rotors going. And so you'll load them while the rotors are still going, or the blades. Other places do a cold, where they shut the helicopter totally down and load the patient then. And then that also depends on how time sensitive everything is with that situation.
Okay, now that Kevin, can you talk about that actually in field as well?
Yeah, well, I think in wilderness medicine, we have the saying that we're going from the ideal to the real. So the ideal is your treatment plan and transport plan in an ideal world, but we're working in this challenging environment, in this real environment. So sometimes the weather doesn't cooperate. Ideally we would fly them out on the helicopter, but again, weather changes. Maybe they can't launch or they can't land. And then one thing I've really learned is, I know Deb teaches an EMT class, that even though I can do all these advanced procedures like start an IV, it's really that foundational basic life support and that EMT training that saves lives. And especially in the wilderness environment, because the minute you start an IV or do something, you're kind of complicating the call, which could in turn complicate extracting the patient from the environment. Like if it's cold, your IV lines are going to freeze. So working in this realm has really made me reappreciate or extra appreciate the basic life support that that EMT training provides.
Thank
Well,
you, Kevin. I appreciate that.
I'm actually okay. So
No,
okay,
you go ahead.
So I think part of why this has been so interesting, this little section for me, is because Deb brings the helicopter from Port-Neuf in to train our students. And I had my father was a firefighter EMT, so I have a okay knowledge of why she might do that, but listening to the two of you talk brings that home way more on how important that helicopter training is for our EMT students.
Yeah, and it's actually a very rare thing.
Mhm.
I didn't learn that training in the city, and
Mhm.
the fact that Deb and ISU has set up that's a really amazing experience and a great learning situation and environment.
So I got a quick question on procedure. So you need to call a helicopter in, right? You're at the scene treating the patient. The helicopter comes in, and it's a medical helicopter, typically, right? So do you just hand off the patient to the team in the helicopter, or does one person from the on-scene care go in and assist as well?
Well, if it's a medical helicopter, they'll have, a flight nurse and a flight paramedic. In Jackson Hole, we work with Teton County Search and Rescue, and that's more just like an extraction helicopter. So they can extract the patient, but it's not a fully equipped medical helicopter. So in those cases, an advanced provider might jump on the helicopter with them.
Yep. The Port-Neuf helicopter, is that a full medical?
It is a full medical, and your nurse and your paramedic have critical care qualifications. Their qualifications are much more than a nurse you'd find in a hospital, paramedic that you'd find at a fire department. Their qualifications, they have many more critical care qualifications behind their name. And they'll come in and we will do a handoff because they're actually a higher than we are.
All right.
Because of that critical care extra education. So we will hand off to them. They have whole blood, which ambulances are starting to get, but it's not real prevalent yet. So they have quite a bit more equipment that they could assist and keep that person alive with.
So then I have another follow-up question. So you're handing off. Now you've maybe been treating this person for quite a bit of time prior to the helicopter arriving to extract the patient. Do you ever have conflict on care procedures with the handoff team?
I've never had conflict, but they have that higher skill set, as Deb mentioned. So they might use medications or procedures. For example, we can insert a catheter to, do a needle decompression for a collapsed lung, whereas like the flight team, they could possibly insert a chest tube. So it's never conflict, but they might do more advanced procedures, sort of like ICU type and ER type procedures because they have that training.
Okay.
It would be like the ER handing off. Well, not so much. We all understand that they have a higher level of care, and that's good. They do more than we can do.
Oh, excellent, excellent, excellent. So this question, Kevin, I want to get to the book. You wrote a book, and what made you write a book? What made you write a book?
Sure. Well, Lights and Sirens is about paramedic school, and I was inspired to write that because people know what we do, which is save lives, but they don't really know how we do it. So I kind of wanted to introduce readers to that world. And then Wild Rescues is about my time working for the National Park Service. And sort of a similar thing, I wanted to introduce folks to wilderness medicine just because it is so dynamic and challenging. And, you know, I like to say I'm not the hero of my books because I'm the one learning all the lessons. So, making the mistakes, but I'm surrounded by great people. And, so as I learn, the reader learns about wilderness medicine or paramedic school. So, yeah, they're really fun to write. And I find it kind of keeps me balanced as a provider and as a person and just a fun outlet.
So you're telling the stories of those wilderness rescues then?
Yeah, telling the stories and obviously changing patient names and
Right.
identifying details. But yeah, just because the stories are, whether it's like a bison goring or, one time we wanted to land a helicopter and there was a bison on the landing zone that wouldn't move. So just all these, stranger than fiction type of scenarios that we experience.
Great. So I'm not getting too much in the weeds, Kevin. What was one of your most difficult rescues, or not rescues, but patient care in the wilderness?
Yeah, one that comes to mind is this guy who was missing for 2 days in Yosemite National Park, which is in California. And it was like 40 degrees and rainy those 2 days. And I think he might have taken some hallucinogenic mushrooms and went for a hike. But that was interesting because when we found him, he was talking to us and standing. And then as we got him into the ambulance, he really started to deteriorate. His mental status declined and he became basically unconscious. And that kind of taught me about this phenomenon known as rescue collapse, which is kind of paradoxically, when we arrive, it's the safest time for the patient, but could be the most dangerous because if they're hypothermic, that cold blood starts coming back to the heart and some of the toxins in the blood. And then on a mental level, they've been, struggling and holding on, kind of keeping those vessels compressed and that blood pressure up. So we get them in that warm ambulance and they just kind of mentally give up. They're like, hey, you're take it from here. And as they do, the blood pressure bottoms out. So that was really interesting. And I'll talk about that at the conference.
Wow.
Just avoiding that rescue collapse and what we can do to prevent it and kind of pre-plan and prepare for it.
Wow, that's interesting.
But it's, I think some of this is interesting too. It's hard for me not to think about Los Angeles, what's going on in Los Angeles right now as Kevin spoke, because they're in a really unique situation where what's on fire is like the outskirts, where they do have this more like rugged terrain, but there still might be closer to a hospital, or there's much more gridlock on the streets where people have abandoned cars, and it's hard to imagine not only what they're going through, but what people in professions like Deb and Kevin are having to manage at the current moment.
Yeah, I think just briefly,
Mhm.
that just shows that even these city centers can have like wilderness medicine type emergencies, whether it's the wildfires in Los Angeles or Hurricane Katrina with the flooding. So really the training that we'll be focusing on at the conference can work in the wilderness, can work in these cities when they have these huge emergencies. So it's just, yeah, great training to have.
Excellent, excellent. And speaking of the conference, again, one of the main reasons Kevin's on today and Deb's on today is because we're having that emergency medical conference. Angie, can you just speak to that real quickly about the dates and so forth?
Yes, so I'm going to turn part of that over to Deb. It is February 7th and 8th. We do have a pre-conference on the 6th that is currently full. However, if you are interested in that pre-conference, please sign up for our waiting list. You can find this at cetrain.isu.edu /EMC for Emergency Medicine Conference. This is an annual conference we have for any sort of training for emergency medical professions in the surrounding area. We also do have a wilderness physical therapy track for anyone in the physical therapy world, or any EMTs that may, or paramedics that may want a little bit of more of that wilderness physical therapy training in case they are doing some of these backcountry type of rescues. We do have a blue code CPR class new this year. I'm actually going to turn it over to Deb to talk about that.
Well, the blue code is in a very exciting competition that we're presenting this year. Basically, you can come in. We will have an ALS competition where different fire departments, different ALS agencies can bring in their team of 5 people, and they can run a major code, a cardiac code, and whoever performs it better time. All of our mannequins are monitoring their compressions, their breaths, their timing, and how well they are performing CPR, and that the team is working. And then whoever comes out with the best numbers will win a trophy that is a traveling trophy, and some different prizes will come out with it too. We will also have a BLS competition with teams. We also are offering individual competitions, so you can just come in, do so many minutes of CPR, and whoever performs the best there will get prize. So a lot of fun. Put together your teams. That's what we're telling everybody. Put together your teams and come and enjoy the trophy. We will have this every year, so the trophy will be passed along. Also, I think we should mention that the conference is also for medical. So we do have classes that they're running also in CEs.
So, and with that, if you do want to join the team competition, we are asking that you call our office to set that team competition up. Individuals can just show up. If you want to join as a team, please call our office at 208-282-3372 so we can get you set up with the time slot. We are actually running out of time. You might have heard my timer. This goes by extremely quick. Before we turn over to Paul, I'd actually like to give Kevin a few minutes to talk about where you might be able to find his books or any information about him on the internet or on any social medias.
Sure. Well, again, thank you for the opportunity. And my books are on sale on Amazon or maybe at your local bookstore. And I also wrote a book about grizzly bears that came out this past September called Grizzly Confidential. And actually, ISU has a great, they do a lot of really interesting grizzly bear research there. And then my website is just kevingrange.com, and I'm probably most active on Instagram, and my handle there is kevin.m.grange. And hopefully I'll see you all at the conference.
Excellent. Terrific. Thank you so much. Deb, thank you so much for being on here and giving us information about the conference. Also, those competitions, that's brand new this year, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. Excellent.
That should be fun. I'm hoping. So, Kevin, I film the conference each year, so I'll see you there, and let's see if we can get some footage of that competition this year. So, Kevin, Deb, thank you for being on the show today. It's greatly appreciated. And I always love the wilderness stories. I want to hear more stories.
Yeah.
So if people want to check out our offerings, including the EMT and the advanced EMT that's coming out this summer, they can email us. They can check out our webpage at cetrain.isu.edu. Oh, sorry, Angie, I almost forgot you. Thank you so much for being on, as always. They can email us at cetrain@isu.edu, or as Angie gave the number before, they can give us a call at 208-282-3372. And thank you so much, everyone. And as always, be safe out there.